Welcome back to another episode of Talking Points. Once again, we are going to be doing our brand new format. If you watched last time, we're not going to go through the race rundown as we did in the past, especially for this race, because Mexico was an absolute stinker. However, we have took your feedback on from the last video, so right at the end of the video, we will still be doing our head-to-head. So if it's something that you don't want to be watching, the head-to-heads, that's going to be right at the end, so don't worry about that. So again, if you did not watch last time out, we are literally just going to be picking random topics that we want to talk about from the weekend, and we're going to get straight into it. And I'm going to go first because I'm the captain, I'm the host, so I've decided that it's going to be me first. Again, it's actually quite good that we did change up our kind of format a little bit, because this race was terrible. But for me, the number one talking point, the star of the show, and I'm gonna nick it from Matt because I know that's what he's gonna want to talk about. Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, he's got to be the first one we've got to talk about because he has been MIA all year long. Where has Ricciardo been? And he just turns up in Mexico. I mean, best of the rest. I honestly felt like I was watching the Red Bull Ricciardo. Even I saw a little clip on social media as well as he was chasing one of the cars. He did like a weird, like a gun thing for some reason. Like, that is just such a Daniel Ricciardo thing to do. And just honestly watching it, I just felt so happy for him. But it was quite an interesting race for him, actually, because he did get that 10-second penalty with Yuki Tsunoda, which I thought was I feel it was right. But I did think harsh. That Yuki also did, it might have been harsh, but I did think that Yuki kind of left the door open. Like, I feel like Daniel kind of left his nose in there, and don't get me wrong, it was Ricciardo's fault, but it's almost like he spooked Yuki just a little bit, and I feel like that's maybe where Yuki went wrong. But again, it was Ricciardo's fault. He did, I think, deserve the penalty, but to see him make that alternative strategy work, to see the old Ricciardo do those overtakes, it was just like such a throwback to the past as well. Really good to see. Good to see him smiling, not smiling through the pain like I've been, because I've been slandering him to kind of like deal with it. That's my coping mechanism. But see him actually smiling about the performance. So, I mean, it's got to be Ricciardo. It's just all of the moves that he did, and also making the strategy work as well. It wasn't like he was kind of the quickest from the beginning of the race, but it's the fact that he actually had the speed and the performance and the trust in the car to make it work, because other drivers were on kind of a similar strategy and didn't. So yeah, to see Daniel back kind of be the real star of the show, especially since the fight up front was a little bit boring, he's got to be my number one talking point. But Matt, what were you? I was seeing your tweets. I mean, what were you thinking when you were watching that?
I mean, it's so great coming into a Talking Points podcast and not having to like come up with excuses for Daniel's performance. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think a penalty was deserved. I do think 10 seconds was a bit harsh, because I don't think, like, as you said, Yuki did open up the gap. And like, I don't think Ricciardo was going for like a late dive bomb or was intending to overtake in that sort of on that second corner. I think the idea is that he wanted to go sort of side by side to compromise him to then try and get the exit out. But then Yuki did leave a bit of a gap, but then he had full right to then cross over, and then that's when the contact happened. So I think 5 seconds would have been more fair. I think if you look at what happened to George Russell, at the last race in Austin, he took out Carlos Sainz. He got a 5-second penalty. That's where I'm drawing my sort of comparisons from.
That was lap one, though. I think that's why they.
Yeah, but still, I know there's this whole tolerance with the stewards of like, lap one shenanigans, so therefore what have you. But at the same time, I'm like, well, no, that's what is kind of been deemed there. I did feel like it was a bit of a half-assed kind of move going into that from Daniel's side. But as you said, the strategy did really work out for him. I think this has been one of the very few occasions where the McLaren strategy has actually worked for Ricciardo, because most of the time it's normally going from mediums to hards. And the hard tyres, as we saw here with pretty much all drivers going onto the hards, they can't get it into the right working temperature or working condition to get any grip from it or performance. But that's been Ricciardo's situation kind of most of the season, where anytime he goes onto the hards, the race is pretty much over, because he's the one who struggles so much with them. Whereas with this one, like he was able to extend the mediums so long and then go onto the softs, actually meant like he actually had the proper performance. Because I think he looked at Sebastian Vettel, or they were looking at Sebastian Vettel's time, because I think he did like 30 or 35 laps on the softs, Vettel did. And which is all the confidence they needed to do. But yeah,
38. I'm looking 38 laps on the softs.
Jesus. So then obviously they had a bit of confidence knowing that, like, okay, going into the end of the race, it's all fine. And I was just really happy for it. I mean, like, yeah, it seems like just for these last few races, we might have the old Ricciardo back. If they do go back into going from the mediums to the hards, we're not going to see that again. Guarantee that. But also, I do need to say this could be a random occurrence. Like, there was nothing else kind of going out on track. I could very much expect that the next race, it could be an absolute stinker once again. And we already know he's not going to be racing next year. So we're already crying from it, but at least we got to see one last sort of hurrah from it, as it were. But Hayden, what was your thoughts? Because I think, like, Daniel kind of pretty much stole the show because there wasn't much of a show else with the Mexico Grand Prix.
There was nothing else going on. In terms of the I think I agree with the 5 second. I think, yeah, it was quite harsh. I think because Yuki was out of the race, they kind of felt like they had to give something, and I think they were kind of rushed it a little bit. They didn't need to make that decision because Ricciardo was no longer, or Tsunoda was no longer in that race, so Ricciardo, they could have delayed the penalty if they wanted to, maybe a grid drop or something like that. Or what I think it should have been a 5 second. In terms of the leaving room and sort of opening the door, so the way that you take that corner is you completely miss the first apex and you take the second one. It's the fastest way through the corner. If you're taking the first apex, you're just going to compromise yourself. So that's why the door is kind of open a little bit. But that's why I also think it should have been a 5 second, because you are taking that second apex. That's where you count it, because the rule is, isn't it? You have to be in front at the apex. Obviously, there's two of them in there. I just feel like
wing rule now, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, well, it's it's kind of more like alongside. You have to be like ahead, don't you? So I think obviously he was just sticking his nose in the first one, and I think Yuki then should have maybe been a little bit more wise to it. However, in hindsight, for us watching, it's a lot easier to be like, how did you not see him in your mirrors? But there's such small mirrors. He's kind of probably in a blind spot there. So 60-40 on Daniel for me, and that's why I agree with you. I think it should have just been a 5 second penalty. But thank God it happened, because it made our race actually exciting. Otherwise, that would have gone down as a 0 out of 10, I think, for everybody in terms of race rating.
Yeah, and I think as well, like you were mentioning there, that's probably one of the more technical parts of the circuit where you're having to like look at the head of the next corner rather than it just being like a simple like left to right. It's very much like the one moment where you probably can't quickly check your mirrors because you've got so much stuff going on. But here's one though, like I was curious to think like if he was to pass Yuki like absolutely fine and say like down the next DRS straight, as it were, I don't think much of the order, a bit apart from Yuki still being in the points, I don't think much would have actually changed in terms of like positions, because it kind of didn't really affect Ricciardo's race at all, because obviously he had like a good, I think it was 11-second gap in the end over to Ocon, who was behind, which meant like, once the 10-second penalty had to been applied, no issues whatsoever. That's what I was cheering on for in the last few laps, just be like, a few more seconds, yeah!
That's what you're always cheering for, aren't you?
Yeah. Exactly. Just a few more seconds. Come on, hold it in. And there's a checker flag. There we go.
Brilliant. I was going to say, I don't think this podcast is a PG-13 anymore. But anyway, what was... Do you know what it was, actually? Even though the move didn't kind of come off, I was just happy to see him like on the front foot. Like, he was trying to make the move. Yuki definitely knew that he was kind of there because they were battling side by side through the previous couple of corners. And I feel like...
up a bit.
I think it was Danica Patrick that I kind of put it right in terms of like, I think he spooked Yuki. Like, that's what happened. Like, that's why he really missed the apex. Because I think Zhou and Vettel had a similar kind of battle later on. And Zhou, like, he cut across Vettel a lot earlier and took that apex a lot earlier because he was not looking for anyone to try and dive down the inside. But it was just good to see Daniel on the front foot, even going for moves, even if they kind of, weren't being pulled off. But yeah, to then go through the field as well, 11 seconds clear. I mean, yeah, it's something that this was like his Monza. This was the 2022 the Monza of last season. So
his one race of the year.
Exactly,
and it's only for P7 as well. It's not that good of a result. It's more like points, like that's it. That's all it is.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. This was a race because Ricciardo actually pulled it off. And by the way, just a little side note: did anyone see Toto Wolff wearing that Enchante merch? That that's what, I'm not saying conspiracy theories, but I definitely saw it. So anyway, Hayden, what was your first talking point of the weekend?
I think the biggest talking point of the week. And it was the news of the cost cap penalties coming in before the Mexican Grand Prix. Now, there was a lot of people talking, was it harsh enough, to outline it for anybody who, for some reason, doesn't know. Red Bull get a 10% reduction of their aerodynamic testing time, that's CFD, and wind tunnel, but the 10% isn't like a solid 10% is taken from the allocation they already have. As winning the Constructors' Championship, they have 70%, so therefore 7% is withdrawn. Them on 63. Their closest rivals is 75% in terms of timing, and they get a 7 million. And they
He's
get
on it.
exactly, I am, and they get a 7 million.
Is everyone
dollar.
still with us so far? That's a lot of numbers, which I'm still trying to work out as well.
Everybody's got bigger brains than you. We're all fine.
I know,
$7 million dollars of fines as well that they have to pay within 30 days. My problem with this, now I think it's a perfectly fine penalty. A dream scenario, British bias is obviously take away the championship. Lewis is 8-time world
Disqualify
champion.
them immediately
But
from
pushing
both.
the British bias to the side and thinking logically for once, right? I think it's a fair penalty. Taking away wind tunnel time for a small, like at the end of the day, it was like 400,000. Spending £1 over is still spending over. You should still be penalised for it. But I think it was the okay. My one problem is that the 7 million isn't taken out of the cost cap. And also, the 10% is taken from their allocated share. Because the way I see this is this punishes lower teams more than it punishes bigger teams. If you're Williams, or Haas, because they have 115%, or Williams have 150%, whoever's at the bottom will get 15% of their allocation taken away. And for Williams and a Haas, they're only just reaching the cost cap in terms of how much they're spending across the season. So 7 million for them in 30 days comes out of their cost cap money because they just don't have the money to spend. So for me, I feel like that's how the penalty should have been given out. But regardless, I still think it is a fair penalty.
I think in the moment for the likes of Williams and Haas, it'd be like an achievement to even spend over the cost cap, to even get there, let alone spend over it. But
yeah.
no, I do get what you mean. Of course, obviously, like, you know, taking 10% away from, I think it's like 115 that Williams get, is obviously going to be a much bigger hit than if you're like first in the constructors with 70. But I think it's a weird one with the penalty. I do think the one thing that I didn't like is that the 7 million fine, like that is nothing to Red Bull. When you think about how much the top teams especially have had to like downsize. I think Mercedes was spending like 300 million at one point, or like 200 and something million before the cost cap. So for them so they have that money in the reserve. Teams like Red Bull, Ferrari, that's whatever. But it was a bit strange that there wasn't any, even 2 or 3 million taken away from their future cost cap for 2023 or something. So yeah, that's the only part that I didn't like. I think the reduction in wind tunnel time, it's about right. I think the race said that it kind of equates to 1.5 constructors' places in terms of like how much time is taken away from them. So, and that is going to have an effect next year. There's no doubt about it. But the conversation that people are going to say is that they've already done the learning. You know, they potentially already benefited a little bit from last year coming into this year. As it carries over, the benefit is going to continue into 2023. So I get the argument from both sides. The fact that no one's really happy about it, Red Bull's not happy about it, the other teams, of course, are not happy about it, kind of makes me think that maybe that it is kind of a weird compromise. So yeah, but it's also a bit strange in terms of, I get the whole that they actually overspent by 400,000 because, you know, it's either 1.8 million or 400,000 because 1.4 was apparently kind of a tax remit that they didn't get back, but
yeah,
none of the other teams tripped over that. So I don't buy that fully from Red Bull, but I think it's about right, and I think they were always going to be a tiny bit more lenient because Red Bull did kind of agree to the breach and enter that ABA. But yeah, I think they're being lenient for their first year because, you know, they understand that of course it's going to be a little bit more difficult through this through this first year, but it's still it needed to be done by the FIA, and I feel like no one's really happy about it. I feel like it's an okay penalty, but I think we're going to see, you know, next year in terms of how much it's really going to affect them.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I wasn't really happy with the punishment. I think it should have been a lot harsher. I think, because you mentioned it there, Aldous, like, you know, there was various, like, figures going around, and, you know, from my simple countryside brain, just hearing one figure, it's really hard to wrap my head around with that big of a number being a real thing. So, like, the thing that, from that, it's been, like, 1.4 to then 400,000, and that's basically where... When the FIA was
1.8 originally, and then
1.8, yeah, sorry, and so that's why the FIA wanted to extend what their decision would be to properly, basically telling Red Bull, hey, if you actually put this as tax cuts, actually would have been a lot lower. And also we've heard that actually the FIA don't actually have that big of a resource for people to go into doing all of the into the cost caps, which is funny enough that they just don't have the personnel enough to do that. I think my biggest annoyance from it, like, I agree with the reduction of the wind tunnel test. My main thing is that I wish they had taken, like, the percentage of the fine. So let's say, like, they went over by, like, 5%. Like, you go up to different brackets of how much you've overspent. So rather than just going to, like, 7%, it should be, like, 10% of what the maximum could be of that 5% they overspent. But then minus that from the 2023 cost cap budget that they have. I think that's my main annoyance, because like you said, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, all these teams, they've got endless amounts of like cash. But what they're fixated on is how much they can spend in that season. So if on the 2023 car, that cost cap is then lowered by 5% because of your penalty, that there for me makes it a bit more of like a hallmark for all other teams being like, right, if you overspend, you're losing 5%, 10% on these things. Because if you have an external fine, then yeah, you can easily just pay that off. What is that? And also I didn't
You
quite like...
You don't want to buy penalties. That's not what, that
Exactly.
That should be.
So that's why it should then affect future cars. I personally don't think, I know we've seen it before, but that was at a different period. I think removing championships, like, with Red Bull or Verstappen, I don't think that was ever going to really work. Whether that's good or not, that's to your own belief. But also some of the comments, Horner was making in his own little press conference with his weird little reading glasses, which is like one of the first times we've ever seen that. So Karen is proper like Karen Horner's properly like about to go off. Some of the like his responses to Crofty was sort of saying like, oh, we never got an advantage because it was all to do with like employee sick pay and like catering. It's like, well, no, there clearly has been because you've overspent on different areas. So if you didn't spend as much on the manufacturing a car and thing, that means you would have had more money in your total budget for catering. So like you're looking at it very much like, oh no, engine was this budget and catering and sick pay was this budget. And like Karen kept saying to everyone like, oh, what, so you just don't want to pay the sick employers pay? It's like, no, you've calculated the wrong budgets for the thing. So in theory, you have had an advantage on the car because you have spent too much on what you thought you had enough money on. And therefore on this other area, you didn't have that. So it's like so that's one thing for me I got really frustrated at. It's like you clearly haven't acknowledged what's going on. But also I think some people as well, that it's the first time they're learning how like court systems like this work, where you can have a plea bargain where you do need to have that discussion of what the terms are going to be. But that's obviously where you're going to be like, right, if you're found guilty, this is what your thing's going to be. Have a bit of discussion like how much you're going to pay and whatnot. Or if you think it's not guilty, we'll go to the high courts and then it could be an even worse a fine. So I think that's where a few people were like, oh, how come Red Bull are allowed to decide their punishment? It's like, it's not really that case. It's more of like, right, let's actually look at the financials, explain it to you guys first before then you make a big public statement at the Mexican Grand Prix. But anyway, it's
also because Red Bull technically have every right, and whatever the FIA say about Red Bull or whatever punishment they give to Red Bull, after that Red Bull have all of the right in the world to then go to court again. I think go to like an arbitration or something. And that's where the FIA don't want to go, because then that drags on for months. And then we're talking about the 2021 championship in 2023. So that's why the ABA is there. And also why Red Bull kind of in the end begrudgingly actually accepted it, because there was, if they then lost the further court case, then championship points would have been on the table apparently. So the reason why they begrudgingly accepted it is because by accepting the ABA, there was not going to be any kind of doubt about championship points. No one, talking about the constructors or the drivers. Obviously, I know that they didn't win the constructors, but dropping maybe even further down in 2023 or whatever. So, or 2021, I should say. So that's why they accepted the ABA. But yeah, I think it was handled all right. I still think that some money should have been taken out of their budget cap, in my opinion, because I think the 7 million is like, it's a bit of a joke, to be honest, to Red Bull. I mean, that's probably what they spent on catering. Do you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I'm looking, do you know what? I'm secretly looking forward to next year as well, in terms of, is this going to come up again? What team's going to get caught out? Because all of them are trying, and all of them are pushing every single last penny of that budget cap and looking for little loopholes if they can. But it's just Red Bull that have got caught. I do actually want to say really quickly and ask Hayden, do you think that Lewis Hamilton should be an 8-time world champion? Do you think that Red Bull should have had their championship taken away?
I think he should be an 8-time world champion, but we have to look back to 2007 and the mistake he made there for that one, to be honest.
Oh, brilliant. Right, Matt, what's your first talking point?
Well, speaking of that, of Red Bull and drivers potentially being robbed of their title championships, one thing which is probably more...
Max is never going to speak to us now, Matt. Why would you say that?
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about now. For more the sort of the UK sort of audience of Formula One, one of the talking points that came out from this weekend is actually more talking points that's been going on from the season, that Max Verstappen decided that he was no longer going to be doing any Sky Sports F1 commitments, and then that was also followed up by the rest of the team on actual race day, that Red Bull as a team, in terms of their personnel, of anyone working there, will no longer be conducting themselves in any interviews or some stuff during the race to that. And that is following from the comments, particularly just with Ted Kravitz, who has said numerous times over the season, and more prominently as some stuff he said as well in Mexico, sort of giving his own sort of bias towards saying that's Max Verstappen sort of robbed Lewis of his 8th world title, and also talking about how he's only won it because of the cost cap, and other sort of comments he's made throughout the season. Obviously, Max has come out since then and actually said to in a Formula One press conference that it's come to the point now where the disrespect is just like he's just not tolerating it anymore. And I think he used the analogy that social media can be quite a toxic environment, and then when you're having a spokesperson on TV who's meant to be remaining, fairly unbiased. I know it's different for us with us four here. Well, not us four, us three, but obviously with Tomo as well, where we are just giving our F1 opinions. Take it or leave it. If you don't like it, off you go, see you later. But ultimately, we're just fans of the sport. That's all we like to do. But for TV personnel, it should be remained unbiased because you wanted to give all the information to the viewer to give their own, so then they can lead up to their own judgment. But when you are then adding fuel to the fire of saying words like robbed or what have you, it's just them fueling this ever-growing pit. And I think Max even said it best, like, he's like, leave the stuff that's in the past. Like, yeah, Abu Dhabi, like, the whole controversy that happened there, it's so boring now, the conversation about it. It's gone, it's happened, you can either be upset about it, you can be angry about it. It has happened. We do at some point need to eventually move on from it. And I know there will be never a good time or good answer of like a black and white of what happened and what not happened. But from this then, it means now that Red Bull are, both drivers and team personnel, are no longer to speak to Sky Sports. But Hayden, I'll go to you to get your thoughts on this. Do you think, because I respect Max actually for doing this, because like fair play to him, like he's actually taken a stand on this, because I know some drivers have done stuff similar to this before. But what's your whole view on it?
One, I don't think we're going to hear the end of Abu Dhabi 2021 because, of course, we're still yet to go there this season. Of course, they're going to keep on
buckle up,
about
Matt.
Non-stop. That's literally going to be the only talking point for the whole weekend on the broadcast. Let's be real.
Please let there be a late safety car in Abu Dhabi again.
It's not the first time. Obviously, we hear it a lot. British bias. A lot of people. I think for Sky, I've spoken to Fem. Fem's my girlfriend. She's from the Netherlands, and I was asking about Ziggo and how they conducted themselves, and she was saying that they were extremely biased. Like, there was a lot of bad stuff said about Hamilton and Ocon, but now they've got a new one this season called Viaplay, and she said that one's a lot more professional. So that's their side. So obviously fans could go, oh, but you've been biased from the Netherlands this whole time, but they've obviously seen this is maybe not the best way to conduct ourselves, especially as now we've got a world champion. So they've sort of fixed that. So Sky have to kind of do the same. And for us over here, we obviously are British. We're watching it from a British point of view. It's going to kind of be more veered towards a British audience. However, Sky are also the world feed. Like, they are the main world feed. They have to stay neutral because they have people from around the world and different countries watching them. So you can see it in two aspects in terms of, and look, I think the one from either USA or Mexico, the most recent one, I don't think it was that deep, but I haven't really
I think this has been all season.
I haven't really been paying attention to it. I don't watch a lot of the broadcast other than the race. Sometimes when I'm in the air, I don't watch the broadcast, I watch the highlights because I'm in the air.
Highlight merchant, he's admitted it.
He doesn't even watch Formula 1, he just looks at the results sometimes and gets to the podcast.
Pretty much. I'm like, let's just scroll through it, this is good.
Ricardo P7? What?
So I think you raise a good point there, though, of like, it's, because like, with Ziggo, obviously, I was always surprised, like, previous times when, like, the reporter, I can't remember his name, it's one reporter always talking to the drivers, and his line of questioning is not like, oh, well done today, how did you find the race? It's a bit more like, oh, well, that Ocon guy, he was a bit shit, wasn't he? Like, trying to get more of a jokey answer out of them.
Let's go to a strip club.
Yeah, exactly, stuff exactly like that. And I think it got to a point where...
Amsterdam one, by the way?
Yeah, Zandvoort. And I think, it does get to a point where it'd be like, okay, you need to dial it back a little bit, but also two wrongs obviously don't make a right. And I think as much as I love Ted Kravitz and I enjoy watching his notebook, I remember there was a weird period where he wasn't doing notebooks and it just felt a bit weird not having that. I do think there needs to be a slight conversation, be like, okay, you do have some open and reasonable sort of scope to walk around the paddock and do whatever, but as you said, they are the main sort of broadcast. They need to rein it in just a little bit, I think, for me. But Alice, what's your thoughts on that, man?
Do you know what, to be honest, this to me is like, I've gone backwards and forwards quite a lot of times in terms of like what my opinion is, but the more I look at it, the more I think no one's in the wrong here in terms of this. To me, is such a non-topic in terms of Max is totally right to talk or not talk to whoever he wants, because you know, I know he actually did come out and say after 2021 that he doesn't really care what anyone says in terms of like how the championship ended, but it does have an effect very clearly, even almost a year after. Like when someone said that, you know, that like your championship is like not real or something, and that someone was robbed, and that they're trying to disrespect, you know, the hard work that you put in, and you know, both Max and Red Bull put in so much energy and work and commitment into that season that they don't really. Brilliant. They don't really care. Yeah, exactly. Literal. Exactly. Yeah, you got it. I'm done. They don't really care what happened with Michael Masi. You know, they didn't do anything wrong, and that's true. Max didn't do anything wrong in Abu Dhabi. Well, all he did was drive a pit and then overtake Lewis on the final lap, which is exactly what he needed to do. So I think that's why Max feels really disrespected, and I totally understand that. Why would you want to speak to someone? Unless you have to do, obviously there's media duties, like, you know, obviously after the race and after qualifying, but why would you want to speak to someone that, you know, behind your back, all they're talking about is how, you know, they were robbed and stuff like that. So I totally get that from Max, but I also kind of get it from the Ted Kravitz side as well, in terms of something that people have been saying is that the language that he's been using is very tough. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, using the word robbed, that's a very big term, you know, that obviously evokes a lot of emotion, but he's also not technically saying anything that didn't really happen. Do you know what I mean? Like that's, you know, he's saying it in a very emotional, you know, an emotional sense, and using a big word like that, which clearly stirred something up in Red Bull and Max, but he's also not wrong to say if that's his opinion. And also it is kind of factual. The FIA said that, you know, again, the words they used, that it was a human error in terms of what the FIA steward Michael Masi did. So no one's wrong, but it kind of, I think there's this line, isn't there, of like impartiality. And even though, again, what Ted Kravitz said is not wrong, is it right to say it in that manner and to keep on bringing it up time after time? I think that's why Red Bull have been really kind of angry. So it's a weird one. I think it's something that we're going to get. Obviously, you know, it's going to heal with time and stuff like that. And of course, they're going to, you know, of course, Max and Red Bull are going to talk to Sky, but it's something that in the moment, I think Max felt that he needed to make a point, like how, you know, you need to move on. How long are you going to talk about the fact that, you know, that Lewis was robbed and that we didn't deserve the championship, especially now with the cost cap poll? I think the cost cap has also kind of brought the emotions back as well. So yeah, it's just everything's boiling over yet again, even after almost a year. So yeah, I don't think anyone's like massively in the wrong. I don't think Ted Kravitz is allowed to say what he wants. He didn't say anything massively inflammatory or anything untrue. Like, he just said, you know, he kind of phrased it in his opinion and his way. And it's kind of like, if you don't like what a journalist says, like, they do have to be impartial, of course, but you also don't then hold their opinion in massive weight. So yeah, it's one of those where I don't have a massive opinion either way. I don't think there's anyone in the wrong. To be honest, I think both of them are right, but it's clearly still going to take time. But yeah, hopefully that kind of made sense. But I'm looking forward to be honest, I am looking forward to the next Max and Ted Kravitz interview, because that's going to be very awkward. I just
not
can't
going to happen,
wait.
I guess.
There was one with Lando, so I think there's also drivers kind of taking a bit of a side on this as well. So there was a conversation with Lando after, and it was mainly just talking about the start. And he was like, I didn't really have the greatest of starts. And he was like, yeah, you lost like 10 places. And he was like, well, why don't you get in the car then? Well, he was like, it's not too bad.
No, technically, he said, oh yeah, you lost 2 positions or something. And it's like,
yeah, he went back to 10th, and he was like, oh, well, you give it a drive, mate. I don't fucking know. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a like a driver standpoint that maybe some of them that are in the Max camp might sort of take his side as well. But then there's also the bad side of it, that social media is just such a horrible place to be. Like, I barely use Twitter these days because I can't be asked for it. And looking at what Ted Kravitz has received on just Instagram posts, that's insane.
What are you doing in your day that you just think, I'm just going to go to this person's Instagram account and just start to give them hate because it makes me feel better? It's just like, what?
That's where I'm just like, the organisers there, they know the situation. They got to try and work it out somehow. Obviously, there's got to be a conversation with the producers there and with Ted Kravitz being like, look, here's the situation. Red Bull don't want to speak to us. And you are at the moment the cause for that. So something needs to kind of work out a little bit here. There is proper channels for that, but then that does not then excuse, you know, toxic fans or whomever to like go into like contacting private like relatives or going onto their own thing and just commenting loads of like clown emojis and stuff. It doesn't open the gates and be like, right, you're now allowed to do this. It's not like all that's happened here is just the terminology that he said. Because like you said, Aldous, before, nothing he said is kind of being wrong. It's more like he said, oh, Lewis Hamilton was robbed of his 8th title, rather than he could have said something like, oh, his winning streak has been broken. Like, that is, they're both kind of saying the same thing, but one has more intent than the other, if that makes sense. And it's just like, yeah, I feel like as fans we can do better than that, like of like just not having to do all this hatred and stuff. But anyway, that's enough of this one talking point, because we've been talking about way too much.
Before I get to my second talking point, I just had like, when you were talking about people commenting on like Ted Kravitz's Instagram, I just had this random vision of like someone going in their group chat like, guys, can everyone post a clown emoji on Ted Kravitz's Instagram? Like, come on, let's do it. But yeah, I bet that's definitely happened somewhere. But anyway, we'll see how this story develops. I'm sure Max and Ted are going to get along. I mean, so yeah, we'll see what happens to those two. But in terms of my last talking point, look, Mexico it's brilliant. I love everything about this race in terms of, you know, before the race, the fans are amazing. The passion is incredible. Like, just the atmosphere. Everyone that has been there says it's amazing as well. Apparently, there was a little bit of trouble. Apparently, there was a little bit of trouble with some fans and drivers, but the overall atmosphere just looks absolutely incredible. But this track is it's not good. It's not good. It's probably one of the top 5 worst on the grid at the moment in terms of, and this has been consecutive years now in terms of giving us good racing. There was some excitement in the midfield, but whether it's Pirelli bringing the wrong tires or whether it's just the racetrack itself, I don't really know what, you know, we need to do. Maybe change a bit more of the layout, but it just doesn't seem to give us exciting racing year after year. I mean, I don't even remember too much from last year's race. And again, it's kind of a big shame because everything outside of the racing was amazing in terms of the atmosphere and what we could see, you know, even like the little special F1 theme tune that was played for the intro. I love it. Like the Mexican, you know,
we need one for every circuit we go to. Like when we come to Britain,
so good.
On the bagpipes, it would absolutely bang. I think every track we go to.
Oh my god, absolutely,
it'll be so good. It'll be
so good on the bagpipes, absolutely. Oh, funny enough, actually, I know Tomo said I was in Scotland, which I was. Let me go get something real quick. You carry on talking. I've got something to show you.
Is he about to play the F1 tune on the bagpipes?
Is he about to play it on the bagpipes?
You just keep talking. Right, track. Tell us how bad it is.
Hayden, I'm just conflicted. The track is now, actually it was confirmed that it was going to be here until 2025, but I feel like the hype never quite lived up. Oh my god, what is that?
It's toy bagpipes. Wait, and wait.
Oh my god.
This is what you're here to hear. This is why you're here.
Before that kind of focused, I was really worried what you were actually holding up, but anyway, I'll leave that there. Hayden, what do you think about this track? Because yeah, again, I love everything about the atmosphere and I do love the location and the kind of the vibe, but the racing just hasn't delivered.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I don't know what it is because obviously it's got 2 long straights. I think it's one of those places where you like having a track that's different in terms of the altitude affecting the cars, and maybe, you know, it's going to be an engine killer, and also teams that are just basically straight line speed merchants, like a Ferrari, for example. They have a very powerful engine compared to Red Bull, whose straight line speed comes more from their aerodynamics. So they were able to work quite well still around here. And it's why we've seen so many times in the past that whenever Mercedes used to come here, it wasn't a track they could win at. And Red Bull were always just like Mexico and Monaco, the 2 tracks where we can get a race win in the season when Merc was so dominant. So I think it's good to have Mexico City on the calendar for that reason, as well, of course, the fan base and the atmosphere that surrounds it. But I think there might need to be a few little changes with the tracks. I've always never really liked the stadium section. I do like the idea of going through the stadium, but I do feel like maybe it could be changed a little bit to help the racing. I'm not too sure what you can really do there because it is such a tight area. But yeah, it's just one of those places that I don't understand why the racing isn't so good, but maybe it is because of the altitude and because the air is so thin there that you are struggling to get the straight line speed, to get the overtakes done. So it's one of those tricky ones, but I do really enjoy it. From somebody who does a lot of racing on the game, it is a fun track to drive. Apart from Sector 3, I do really hate that stadium section. But the S's is always a real joy, and the chicanes always should present overtaking opportunities. So yeah, it's one of those that it's just a mystery. Why is it so bad? I don't know.
Actually, before Matt jumps in, I will say one thing I seriously noticed, and someone else actually said it as well. Especially around the slow speed corners, these cars looked so clumsy and so slow. Like, even though they were going quicker than, say, cars of 10, 15 years ago, they just looked really clumsy and really slow. I can't quite put my finger on why, but maybe it's just the tires or how big they are, or how, I'm guessing it's the weight. But yeah, just on board, it looked really weird. Like, you know, they were going so clumsily slow, but they actually weren't. They were going quick. But it's just, yeah, it didn't look great in terms of watching it on board. But Matt, what do you think about this track and maybe some solutions? Or do you think it's brilliant?
I'm slightly biased because I do love the Mexico City circuit. I've been very lucky enough to actually go there quite a few times when I was doing stuff in Formula E, which was the first ever like F1 circuit I got to visit whilst working in Formula E, and we were doing on the very much shorter circuit. I completely agree though that the racing is really dead, and they need to fix it. And I think the main issue is Sector 3 coming out from the S's. That section, DRS going down into the right-hander, then into the stadium. That bit needs to be worked out. I think what they kind of need to do is kind of almost straight line it into the stadium section, into then like a going into the stadium, going to a left-hander, and then a tight hairpin right to still go through onto it. So therefore, you're using more of the space. It gives you another overtaking opportunity, which then for the fans, it's like, okay, end of a DRS straight. You're going to have, if you want to go on the racing line, you're going to have to go to the right-hand side, but then you can go for a late braking move on the inside and then work out the configuration that way. Formula E obviously is a bit different because they just do the whole outer perimeter. It's obviously still very slow, and that's why they do the attack mode as well. So actually, for a spectator type of view, point of view, it's actually really good. I think they just need to work on another area for an overtaking spot, because I think turn 1 is a really good example of where, okay, if you got the fastest car, you're making it. We saw it with Ricciardo, we saw it with Lando, we saw it, I think, with one of the Alpines before they broke down. So turn 1,
Alonso's
I think is all
Alpine
fine.
broke down, of course. Yeah.
Then we've got the chicanes, and I think the reason they look so sluggish and slow because anytime they rode the curbs, it would completely bottom them out, and they just lose all momentum. Yeah, so I think they need to kind of lower the curbs there a bit, because because you want them to kind of be a bit more aggressive and ride it. Because what I like about it as well, it's one of those tracks where the off-road isn't just painted, it's like actual grass, which I think we all as fans much prefer, rather than a COTA where it's just all pavement. So I think, Sector 3 just needs to be worked on. I think a different configuration entirely for this stadium. But I think that whole end of the DRS section turning right, I think that needs to be kind of completely removed. A little bit like what they did with Australia with Sector 2, where they got rid of the chicane and made it kind of more of a straight line. I think if they did that here for Sector 3 going into the stadium, I think that'll probably sort a lot of the problems out. Because then you got the left right of the chicane of the S's, straight down heading directly into the stadium into a braking zone, and then another configuration to go out of it. You don't have to go through the stadium, you can go around the perimeter of it as well. But yeah, I think Mexico City needs to stay on the calendar. I mean, they were celebrating their 60 years, I believe, since their first race in 1962, I guess it would be. And
quick maths.
Yeah, quick maths. Because when I've been there, the atmosphere has been incredible. The food there, the whole festival vibe that gives off, it's incredible. I mean, hell, the first time I ever probably went there, I got robbed. Still had a lovely time.
I saw it on your Instagram, by the way. Just you just put that at the bottom, just a little note.
Yeah, no, I totally. I had my laptop, all my hard drives, and my camera's stolen. But I still had a good time. So which really goes to show, actually, that's in the area there is great. Because also they have the Macho Libre wrestling nearby to it as well. So many of the Formula 1 journalists and guests go and just watch, load of people just wrestling each other with face masks on. It's brilliant. We should all go next year. It'd be amazing. But yeah, that's what I would change to the circuit.
Well, there you go. Silver linings, ladies and gentlemen. Hayden, what's your last talking point?
My last talking point is the little bit of beef before the Grand Prix weekend with Fernando Alonso versus Lewis Hamilton. Talking about wrestling, it's Alonso versus Hamilton. Beautiful stuff. I don't think what Alonso says was really that deep. I think fans kind of take it a lot further than what even the drivers do. Lewis Hamilton has probably just seen that, it's probably just an interview. I'll just give a thumbs up because it's just nice one, mate.
Quick question from me. I actually fully missed all of this because I was in Scotland.
Okay.
Genuinely, I fully missed it. So please do fill me in with this. Right. I saw the aftermath of this, but I was a bit I saw the photo Hamilton posted of him above him on the podium, but I fully missed the original slander. Yeah. So what? Let me fill me in,
Matthew. There was an interview with Fernando Alonso in which he said that Max's titles are kind of worth more than Lewis's 7 championships because Lewis only had to beat his teammate, and only beating your teammate isn't as good as beating someone from another car is basically. Max had
he totally forgot, by the way, that his first championship he beat Massa, but I'll just, put it
yeah. But also, Fernando Alonso's, his first championship was mainly because McLaren lost it on reliability. And then his second one was because Schumacher's car broke down in Japan. And then also Lewis Hamilton
steady on
beat him in his first season when they were teammates. So it's just kind of like, it's not that deep. It's just like, obviously Fernando's just kind of said this. It's probably teed up by an interviewer. He's answered it. And Lewis has probably just been like, I think throughout the year, we all know that they respect each other and they have a chat, but they're never going to be best mates. You know, they're not going to be inviting each other around for Christmas or all of that sort of stuff. And they're always going to have like little digs at each other every now and again. But obviously the fan bases see this and it just goes through the roof. It's like, these guys hate each other. Drive to Survive is going to have them fighting, literally wrestling in Mexico. And yeah, I was here for it. I loved it, especially Lewis's reply with just the thumbs up and then the picture of him on the top step of the podium, Fernando on the bottom, on the second step.
That picture, by the way, was in like 240p, by the way. It was terrible.
2007 USA GP. And yeah, basically saying, well, when we were teammates, I beat you. So I love it.
Well, I know they had this something before where I think it was Hamilton, he put like, didn't he like sign a cap or something for Alonso? Was it the other way around?
The collision in Belgium when Fernando said that this guy doesn't know how to race and
That's
overtake
it, yeah.
Unless he's at the front. But it's and they kind of hugged it out. I think there was that picture of them, which was kind of funny. Do you know what I love this rivalry. I'm always gonna love this rivalry because it's so old school. It's petty. It's honestly just like Twitter fingers going crazy. I love it. The thing about Fernando is that he is so easy. If I was a journalist and I'd like literally had nothing to do and like had nothing to write about, I'd just go to Fernando and say, so Lewis Hamilton in 2007, and then just let him do the rest. Like, he is just absolute headlines. And he did actually put out a statement and like kind of being a little bit annoyed at the media that people just make too many headlines, and that I do get that. It's so easy when you're a Formula One driver, and especially when you're Fernando Alonso, for you to say something and then people just take out a few words and make headlines out of it. But you're also the one that said it, and it's like, do you know what I mean? It's never going to go away. That's why I love these two, because the thing is, if they didn't respect each other and if they didn't appreciate how good the other is as a driver, they wouldn't even be talking about each other. But that's why they do, is because in a weird way, they do kind of respect each other, even if they kind of like don't, they kind of don't dislike each other a little bit. So it's only because they know how good the other one is, why they like to take these little jibes and stuff. But yeah, it is what it is. I thought Lewis's response was, I think he said it in the post-race interview, actually, in terms of like, he didn't want to respond, so he just gave it the thumbs up. That's it. That's all he needed to say. And Lewis Hamilton, yet again, breaks the internet. I was actually going to tweet this. Lewis Hamilton's ratio of tweets to internet-breaking tweets is unbelievable. Like, every third tweet that he actually puts out breaks the internet. So, yeah. But I also kind of get from Fernando in terms of, like, he was frustrated that, this was kind of taking a little bit too much out of context, maybe, but he's still the one that said it, you know what I mean? But again, I love these two. I like this rivalry. Just keep it going. Just keep it going, lads, because this is box office. I love it. But yeah, Matt.
Right, my last talking point. I mean, it's not really on the actual Mexico Grand Prix because, as we've already said, there wasn't that much that went on apart from the Daniel Ricciardo masterclass. So the one thing I will get your thoughts on, though, is one thing we did see during FP2 was the second or third time now we've had the Pirelli tyre testing.
Pirelli.
And it's the Pirelli tyre testing, and all drivers hating it, basically. Basically, yeah, Pirelli give all the teams the pre-made tyre compounds. They are not allowed to know what sort of compound they're running, whether it's be soft, medium, hard, or whatever the new compound they're trying to experiment with. They can't really adjust too much the tyre pressure, only to kind of what works with their setup. And then once they've got that first iteration done, they then have to lock it in for the rest of the session. And the main, I think the previous one they did was a hards test. So I believe this might have been either a soft or medium test they were going for. We don't really know at the time, but obviously at the time of recording, we don't know it yet. But obviously when this comes out, we eventually might know. The main thing, though, they're testing for this one is no tyre blankets. So come next year, what currently as it stands is that teams, I believe, can warm up the tyres beforehand, but they won't be able to have tyre blankets on the actual cars themselves. So basically, the rubber needs to work to a certain condition at the back. So I think they will still have some heating. It won't just be cold tyres next to like the garage's doors or anything. They will still have some blankets to keep them warm and working in some sort of condition. But as soon as they go onto the car, no blankets whatsoever. And it seems like lots of the drivers were struggling, particularly, just loads of oversteering. We had loads of great shots of the guys drifting everywhere. But then there comes up a bit of a question of like, terms of safety. Okay, is it better for racing, or if it's going to cause a bit more incidents? That's what I kind of wanted to have a quick chat with you guys about. If you're kind of team blankets or if you're team cold.
Blankets. I love that. Are you team blankets?
Yeah, are you team blankets or are you team cold?
You know what? I'm actually probably more for team cold. In all fairness, it as we've seen in F2. It spices things up. We saw at the beginning of the season around Bahrain where someone would make a pit stop and then, they'd get the undercut, they'd lose time, but then they'd be able to get them back because the other person is struggling to warm up those tyres. We'll see more of that next year.
Yeah.
And I understand the way they're going with it as well because they're wanting to be more cost efficient. They're wanting to save money, save energy, of course, and having to heat up these tyres during the whole race because, you're going to have them on the car at some point. Whereas if you get rid of that, that's going to save teams a little bit of money, as well as also saving Formula One a little bit of energy that they are using instead. So I understand it from that point of view. In terms of these Pirelli tyre tests, though, like we probably should have expected that this was going to be a boring race from that boring SP2, because honestly, every time there is a Pirelli tyre test, we had it last time at Austin, it's just a massive snooze fest of a practice session. Now, I don't tend to watch too many practice sessions like religiously. I sort of put it on in the background.
Shock. I'm shocked, mate. You don't tend to watch too much Formula 1.
I just happened to be on a flight somewhere and I missed it.
I get all my knowledge because I play the game, basically. I understand Will. No, but like I'd put it on in the background and I'd end up getting distracted by practice sessions. This time, it was on the background. I honestly don't have a clue what happened in FP2 because it was just so goddamn boring that nothing is going on. Everybody's just doing laps. There's no idea of getting delta and data, all of that stuff for the actual race or qualifying. You don't know what's going to happen. It does kind of mean that teams would have a little bit more unknown going into the qualifying and the race, but at the end of the day, it didn't really make an exciting race either. So what was the point of it? Like, why don't we just... I understand it's because of that cost saving. So they're not doing a separate Pirelli tyre test event.
Yeah.
So that we don't spend all this money on, engines just for this, car parts just for this, and all of that stuff. So I understand it, but it's just so frustrating at the same time.
And I think because they also they give an extra 30 minutes to the practice session as well, because obviously you can't just get a random like track day and have all of your 10 teams there with all 20 cars and be like, right, let's just do a load of testing. It's because and also you can't just take one car because the tyre needs to work for all the cars, not just the one car they got out in particular, because otherwise then some teams could get an advantage over the other teams, yada yada yada. And I think that obviously some people would be like, obviously the main reason they're trying to go down this route is, as you mentioned, Hayden, was the more energy efficient side of things, which obviously, yes, that is not going to fix global warming, that's not going to fix the whole carbon neutral thing, but at least they're making some steps into sort of doing that. I also quite like the idea of going back to having being on Team Cold, because it's kind of more like, I want to say a bit more like traditional racing, where like back in like say the 50s and 60s, of course they didn't have stuff like that there around. It's more like
hugging the tyre with a blanket back then.
Come here, boy.
No, it's putting out their cigarette, mate. It was putting out their cigarette.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Tyre.
Right, I'm gonna drive. Right, here we go. So I feel like, it's something which, you said obviously with F2 it seems to be kind of working all right, and it's obviously with F1. I think it's more just like, it's just down to the safety aspect. If the tyres can get up to temperature quicker, because at the moment it's really hard for these new tyres, which are huge, to get up to temperature in the working window. I think if they can be on a sort of a softer compound and get heat hot quicker, then they can be less oversteery. But Aldous, what team are you with? Are you team blankets or are you team cold?
I'm not usually a fan of the cold, it must be said. But I am team cold. I think the drivers will get used to it. There's no doubt about it. I think it's for coming in not for next year, but the year after in terms of the blanket ban. I think for next year, they're like lowering the temperatures by 10 degrees to like 60 or something. But yeah, in terms of these Pirelli tyre tests, I think the track was just... I didn't actually get to watch too much of it, I'm going to be honest. But but yeah, in terms of these tyre tests, I think the track, even in FP1, was unbelievably slippy. So cars were slipping everywhere. But yeah, I think we'll see how it works in terms of like if they're going to have any effect. I do think it could spice up the racing a little bit. I mean, the overcut is going to be a little bit less the undercut is going to be a little bit less kind of powerful, because when you're going to come out, it's going to be on stone cold, tires. So how are you going to manage that over the course of a lap? Are you going to have more grip than someone on a used tire? I think it could have, even though of course there is a danger aspect to it, but the drivers have to adapt to it. You have to, in the same way that, overdriving a car, you could spin out and crash. You can't overdrive your tires. So yeah, I think the drivers are going to adapt to it, and it might add something to the racing as well. So yeah, I'm not usually, but I'm on team cold when it comes to tire blankets. So next up, I think we're going to move on to the final part of the podcast, and that is our quick driver head-to-heads. We're going to try and storm through them a little bit quicker than usual, and kicking off straight away actually with, shock, Red Bull. I think pretty obvious. Max Verstappen yet again absolutely smashed it. Had whatever Mercedes would have done. I think he had a pace in hand and definitely made those tires work. There was no suspense with like 10 or 20 laps to go. He had plenty of tires at the end and was even extending. So yeah, it's got to be Max.
Yeah, Max
Hayden?
Verstappen for me as well. Record breaker, 14 wins, nothing more that you can say with that, and just smashed it once again. Man and machine working together.
Yeah, I got to go for Verstappen. It was. I think we all wanted Perez to win, especially with his dad there. He looks so happy, like such a proud dad. I wish we were all his sons, because he just looks so proud of Checo. But yeah, Checo just wasn't anywhere sort of near sort of Verstappen's pace throughout kind of like the weekend, which is a shame. But at least he got into the podium. So yeah, it's got to go for Verstappen for me.
Yeah, that's at the very least we got a Checo podium, which was very good to see. Mercedes, I think, again, pretty easy dub to Lewis. I think even though he did get out qualified, he got the job done at the beginning, didn't really kind of look too much under pressure from Sergio. I know Checo got a little bit close when he was fighting with Lewis, but there was never kind of even a real battle. But yeah, unfortunately, Mercedes just couldn't make the strategy work, couldn't make the tires work. I think in the end, Max just had way too much pace in hand, so even if they did try the soft tire, I actually don't think that they would have been able to overtake the Red Bull, even if they did have a tire advantage. But yeah, in terms of the Mercedes, I think it's got to be Lewis, and he's continuing that little run that he's had over George and getting even closer in the championship now.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that one. I think George potentially had the chance of getting pole position, bottled it on his last run, and the one race he could have gone into turn one and said he turned in on me, took out Max Verstappen, Hamilton wins, and he doesn't do it. Like, what he did? But I think both of them drove the best race that they could have done. I think they were kind of hard done by with strategy, and yeah, Hamilton coming out on top in that one.
Yeah, for me as well, it's got to be Hamilton. I think my brother really sort of threw all the toys out of the pram towards the end of the race, because he really just didn't.
Was racing.
Very good.
Oh god, I'm not gonna live that down. But yeah, no, I think like towards the end of it, I don't know if he was lying intentionally to swap his tires, because I think he went, "Oh, I've got a puncture, yeah. And then they were like, Mercedes was like, no, you haven't. He's like, no, I need to box. Like, you really don't, mate. Stop. We can see the pressure. And he's like, all right, fine then. But yeah, no,
Payback
Lewis
for Sakir 2020.
Yeah, easy one for Lewis.
Can I just add on that as well? Very stupid from George, because you come into the pits for the soft tyres, completely understand what he's trying to do, go for the fast lap. Do it right at the end, because if he pits, Perez had no chance of getting Hamilton. He comes in, then he gets fastest lap. You've got to play it the smart way. I think George was just kind of getting a little bit aggravated, so I just want to quickly add that.
No worries. Ferrari, they had an absolute stinker. I think they said it was more because of their car not being able to run because of the altitude and because of the cooling issues. Ferrari were really kind of limited in terms of their performance, but even around the corners, Charles Leclerc was all over the place. And actually, to be fair, a solid weekend. Well, solid weekend. In terms of Sainz being ahead of Leclerc, it's kind of been throughout the entire weekend in terms of our qualifying him. Obviously, Leclerc had that crash, I think, in FP1 as well, and then in the race, Carlos Sainz kept ahead of Charles. So yeah, got to go to Sainz. It was actually a stronger, even though it was a terrible weekend from top to bottom for Ferrari, a stronger weekend from Sainz from start to finish.
Yeah, Ferrari back to basically where they were, last year, 2021, and maybe even the years before. So not a good performance for them this weekend, but in terms of their drivers, Sainz stronger than Leclerc, and not just by a small amount, 10 seconds across the line ahead of him. So a weekend that he will actually be really happy about.
I promise, all heads. We're not all going to be in agreement here, by the way. But yeah, it's going to go to Sainz as well. Yeah,
no,
like
mate,
you said,
you're not allowed to say Sainz. Argue why it's Leclerc. Tell me why it's Leclerc right now.
Okay. For style points, I did not see Sainz at all drifting the car and keeping control during the race.
That's
Leclerc
a good point,
did.
actually. Do you know what? You've swayed me. You've swayed me.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I mean,
convinced.
ultimately, I mean, like Leclerc wanted to do style points during the race, and he got to do that. He pushed a little bit too far in FP1, but then he knew the limit of like, all right, I can't drift it
That's
too
why it's
much, but I can
FP1.
drift it there. And
He
that's
was
why.
actually just hoping that he didn't have to take part in that Pirelli tyre test because it was
Yeah,
so
exactly
boring in
that.
FP2. Unfortunately, they fixed their car. What are you doing?
Yeah, and also like I was a bit like, oh, for fuck's sake, like Ferrari, just. Go on, just turn up the engine a little bit. Just see what you could do in the altitude. It could work for all you know. It could be the
do you remember
master
last time-
plan.
Do you remember Carlos Sainz's engine in Austria when they turned it up? The thing blew up.
But yeah, there you go.
Okay, here we go. McLaren. I mean, I don't remember the last time. Honestly, it might have been Australia that I've actually said this, but it's actually going to go to Ricciardo. I remember we had a little argument, me and Matt. I think it was after Monza. Which I loved. But yeah, it's got to be Ricciardo. I mean, even though he did obviously benefit, and even to be fair play to Lando, he also said that, you know, in Monza, he benefited from being the car behind and getting the better strategy when you got less to lose. Of course, Daniel obviously benefited from a better strategy because he had nothing to lose, but he made it work. He was going for moves. He actually had the pace. It wasn't just given to him, but he actually could go out there and almost show what he can do, which we haven't seen in a while. So yeah, it's got to be Ricciardo, driver of the day, best of the rest. And more than anything, actually, he did get that 10-second gap to Ocon, which I thought was amazing. So, yeah, can't believe it. Ricciardo having easily his best race of the season, in my opinion.
Don't know what you're on about. Lando Norris, you know, harsh strategy, didn't take a driver out. My driver took someone out last week, got slam dunked. The whole of the F1 universe was going against him. Daniel Ricciardo wipes out Yuki Tsunoda. Go on, son, go and overtake everyone.
The difference is Lance Stroll ended up like he put the thing is the difference is Lance Stroll put Fernando Alonso in the barrier. Like I think that's the bigger difference.
He put him in the air, and he really did take off in that race. He did what Daniel Ricciardo did to himself in that race, okay? So we should all be thanking Lance Stroll for what he did to Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, but you got to remember though, people aren't watching Drive to Survive for Lance Stroll. They're watching it for Daniel Ricciardo.
So at least he's got one good episode this year. No, I'm agreeing on Daniel Ricciardo, by the way. I was just chatting shit about Norris.
Yeah, no, I think obviously he's got to go Ricciardo. I think also we got to remember as well, before the VSC came out, he already had made up a 10-second gap, and then the VSC brought that back down, and then I had a bit of a sort of squeaky bum time of like just like okay he's not going to keep P7 but was able to get the pace up to there. I think it was just for Lando it didn't drive badly, it's just due to the strategy, and I think
Still in the points.
Still in the points, yeah, both of them still in the points. I think he finished P9 in the end.
Yep.
P9, nice volume. I know my stats. Wheel knowledge. I think it's just one of the few weekends though where the strategy went bad in Lando's court, because obviously, it was all part with strategy with Daniel obviously making moves, overtakes on a better tyre. But I think it's one of the very few occasions where McLaren actually didn't give Lando the better strategy, and therefore he's paid for it. But I think Lando still drove a really good race.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Ricciardo, he might not have the points, he might not have a race seat next year, but he's got the streets, and let's be honest, that's all that really matters, isn't it? Next up, oh my god, Alpine. Do you know what? Hayden, you go first on this one, actually.
Why? Do you want to think about what it's going to be? I mean, it's easy. I don't know why you're struggling. It's easy. It's Fernando Alonso out-qualified Ocon, and then he had the race under control. He was doing typical Alonso stuff, not pushing, because once the top six had gone, it's just like, what is the point trying to push and catch them? I'm just going to hold everyone up, let them burn their tyres, and see what we can do here. And then, unfortunately, he had the engine cutouts, he had the issues there. That's how Ocon caught him back up, got the overtake, and Ricciardo swallowed him up as well. And then, literally, I remember it was Norris overtaking Bottas, and then all of a sudden there's just an Alpine just driving off really slowly. It's like, oh, bye-bye. So, karma for the interview that he had earlier in the week. But Fernando Alonso, head-to-head.
Matthew?
Uh,
No, I want to hear your one first, because you bottled it. So,
Oh no, I haven't bought it. It was always going to be Fernando. I wanted to keep my frustrations in before I vented them. It's just, yeah, at the point that actually his engine, he lost a cylinder apparently. He went down to 5, so yeah, and after that his engine just went kaput. Surprise, surprise. I think at the point where his engine started breaking down, he was like 10, 12 seconds ahead of Ocon, which is like crazy. So he was a comfortable best of the rest, and like, Yet again, even during the race, there was this hilarious moment on the radio where I think his engineer was like asking, what tire they're going to put on. And Fernando was literally just like, anything, mate. Put anything you want. I've got it under control. I've got the pace. I'll get to the end. And he didn't. The car yet again has let him down, but I think I've said this about 20 times this season. Like, even when the car keeps letting down, even when he's had reliability issues, whether, they're big or whether they're terminal like this one, he was still best of the rest. He's still got the speed. He's still absolutely rapid. He's still at the top of his game, even at age 41. But it's just, maybe it is karma, Maybe it is karma. I'm not ruling it out because I'm not a big believer in it. But after this weekend, after his luck this season, yeah, I think we might have to reevaluate if karma is the real thing with Fernando Alonso. But yeah, it's still Fernando. He was the better driver and got massively unlucky. But
yeah, and I think that's the same for me. Yeah, he's got to go to Alonso for me, which is a bit of a shame because Ocon's been having a really good season up until now. I was surprised there was like you said, the 10-second sort of drop between the two of them before they had the issues. I also really loved the team message he said at the very end, being like, "What a season! What a great season!" And sort of to really rub it into Alpine about how awful it's been. And yeah, I was really worried as well when he did get out of the car. He initially sort of just threw a punch like in the air because he's just annoyed, and then he just started waving to the fans. And then in my head, I was like, "No, get off the circuit! You're making the gap smaller." So I was thinking at some point, okay, is he trying to like close up the gap so Ocon can try to like? I did actually, by the way,
I love that because there was like. It was 2 seconds from him like punching the air at frustration and then waving to the fans like, "Hey, what's up?"
I was worried I was worried he was just delaying the VSC so then Ocon to like could close up the gap to Ricciardo's and then in theory Ocon could have a higher position finish. But yeah, got to go Alonso on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I understand protecting your team, during even when it's frustrating, but I mean, there's only so much that you can protect the team when your engine's blown up every other race. But yeah, we go again, Fernando. Maybe you'll finish it next time. Good luck. Next up, we have actually someone who was absolutely smashing it all weekend. I think actually a little bit harsh to only be P10, and that is Alfa Romeo is up next. But it's got to be Valtteri on this one. I was like, Team Valtteri for this weekend. But yeah, it's got to be Valtteri for Alfa Romeo. He's had crazy pace all weekend long. Like, he's been on it. Like, that Alfa Romeo has been so up and down, but clearly something was working, on this track, maybe at this altitude. And he even outqualified Leclerc in an Alfa Romeo, which I thought was hilarious. So, yeah, it's got to be Bottas, but I feel like P10's almost a little bit harsh. I think he was better than that. But, yeah, at least, I think the first time he scored points since, like, France or something, or since Canada. So, it's been a long point drought for Valtteri. So, yeah, good to see him kind of back up there in their midfielder, scrapping for some points.
Yeah, really strong result for Valtteri there. I think the car was really good in qualifying, and obviously he extracted everything out. It was a mega lap from him, got him into P5. But in terms of race pace, the Alpine and the McLaren was just a little bit better. And unfortunately, there was only one DNF from the top 5 cars, and that was Fernando Alonso. So to get a point, I think that was really the best that they could have done in that weekend, unfortunately. But yeah, Bottas, very, very strong and a little bit disappointing. Show, but hopefully he can bounce back in Brazil.
Yeah, got to go to Bottas as well. But yeah, amazing qualifying. Just seemed like as soon as the race started, it's almost like it was on like a wrong setting and it just started dropping back, unfortunately. There was that spectacular double overtake, though, I think, on Zhou with Bottas, and I think it might have been Ocon, going down into turn 1. Just absolutely lovely, but obviously for Zhou, that must be so heartbreaking when you've been overtaken by one person and all of a sudden your teammate is also there and you're like, damn it! And you just got no control over it at all. But yeah, got to go to Bottas. Like, really good qualifying. But yeah, it sucks it's only P10.
Yeah, Hayden, tell your boy that he needs to like up his game a little bit. Up his game. We need to see him back in the points.
There's only one bad race in a while, to be fair, so it's not too bad.
That's true. Next up, we have AlphaTauri, the team that they were catching a lot of L's. I mean, Pierre Gasly, I think, was a little bit frustrated with his team, and obviously he had that kind of incident with Ocon, forcing him off the track and getting. And to be fair, we spoke about this a tiny bit on Twitter between me and Hayden. Like, it almost feels like the team were like, they knew the 5 seconds were coming and they were like, forget it. Let's just keep going. Let's,
Who did he force off again?
Esteban Ocon.
Don't think it was Esteban Ocon. It was my boy Lance Stroll, all right?
Oh, was it?
His name in your mouth, okay? Don't be afraid to say his name. Say his name.
It was.
Say his name.
It was Lance Stroll, wasn't
Say his name. Come on.
I thought it was Esteban Ocon. Oh my god.
Look at Aldas going so red. He's forgotten F1 knowledge.
Someone's like,
he's a highlights merchant.
Something bad happening to Lance Stroll. We just ignore that.
I keep forgetting Lance Stroll's even on the grid. Like, why is he here?
You better remember it next year.
I just automatically go to that. That's why. Because after Lance Stroll took out Fernando Alonso in the US, I just forget he's even on the grid. Like, I refuse to accept he's even in Formula One. But yeah, I feel like I feel like the team should have told him to give back the position, but I think they felt like that 5 seconds is probably coming. But we've got so much pace, just keep pushing. Like, forget about it. But I do think it's going to go to Pierre Gasly. I feel like Yuki was actually a lot closer though. I think he outqualified Pierre, but obviously then there was a bit of a Ricciardo shenanigans that sent Yuki out the race again. So yeah, not another good race for Yuki, but I think it's going to go to Gasly, but I think it's just an L all round for AlphaTauri, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think they would have scored points even if Tsunoda stayed in. I think it would have been P11 as well for him. My point of view for the Gasly thing was, even if they did
Gasly
tell
knock-on,
him...
yeah?
The Gasly knock-on, yeah. Even if they did tell him, he would have lost so much time giving back that position to Stroll and then staying behind Stroll for a little bit longer, then trying to re-overtake, losing time going wheel to wheel. It was a no-brainer to get him out of the way, go on the attack. And people were talking at the end of the race being like, oh, well, if he didn't lose that 5 seconds, he would have been ahead of Bottas, because I think the gap was only like 5 seconds between the two of them. But it wouldn't have worked like that. Like, I think, in my opinion, he would have lost more time being behind Stroll. It was the better option. Sometimes you can be smart with these penalties. Be like, do you know what? Let's just take the hit. Let's go for it. The one big thing is, though, that he got a penalty point or two. I think it was 1 penalty point.
1 point.
And he's 2 away.
Yeah.
And they don't go away until May. So therefore, that is a third into next season that he's got to be on his best behaviour.
And for stuff like this, they've had it before where they have awarded 2 penalty points before. So in this one, it's actually a bit of a...
Ricciardo got 2 today. For that race as well, yeah.
Exactly. So I think I think prior ones they've given away 2 points, but for this I think it's just 1. I'm actually going to go to Tsunoda on this one. I think it's the first time we've actually had disagreements with that. Well, not disagreements, but different people in general. Because I think, like, you know, although Tsunoda's pace wasn't like grand or anything, he was still doing a good old stint. And also with Gasly, he made the mistake of, like, he locked up, he pushed Stroll off, and he made the mistake, whereas, you know, Yuki didn't really do that. So I'm going to give this one to Yuki, I think, because I think, just the whole situation in general, I think he should have given back the place then and there, rather than just, like, taking the hit. Because I think I'm just more of a fairer racing, because I know now it's up to the drivers to kind of sort it out on track, and if they don't do it themselves, then race control will do it as well. I know a few people are a bit like, oh, why are they giving 10 seconds, not 5 seconds? Because obviously they were actually quite smart with that, I think, and actually looking like, well, he's actually made up so much of a gap, so he's actually after they applied the ruling, he was then 2 or 3 seconds behind where Stroll would have been. But basically, either way, I thought I'm going to Tsunoda on this one.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, obviously, you know, your boy took him out, absolutely hashtag robbed, so... You know, what can you do, Yuki? Well,
he should have been looking in the mirrors. Rookie, get out my way.
Well, only one of them has a job next year, so, you know. Anyway.
And we are the reserve.
Do you know what? Next up, we actually have Williams, because Aston Martin also had an absolute stinker. Again, not too much to say. Albon, he was kind of battling for the points, but that Williams is still the slowest car on the grid. So he did a decent job, actually, to kind of just be on the fringes of the, kind of fighting for those points, but not quite there. Latifi, by the way...
Get him the fuck out.
I know he did have 2 stops.
He got lapped by his teammate. He got lapped by his teammate in a Williams. Why? We don't need to discuss this. We don't need to... We all know it's going to be Latifi. Oh, get him out.
What?
Well, Latifi is your driver. Okay, that's it. Matt's pick, Latifi.
So Matt says Latifi over Albon, which is a bit odd. Okay.
Don't put words into my mouth.
He was only 50 seconds behind the next driver, and it wasn't a minute, and I think we should all applaud that, in all fairness. Like, let's think about the positive. Let's not always be negative about drivers, you know? We said it earlier. Let's not hate on people. It's just
one in particular, not all drivers.
No, we said let's not hate on people. Let's not be nasty. So let's just be nice. And he was only 50 seconds off. And in qualifying...
Off the car in front.
Off the car in front. In qualifying, he was only 4 seconds or 3 seconds off. So, look, there is positives. There's 4 tenths off, sorry. There is positives to take from it. In FP3, he beat Vettel and Magnussen. So,
the FP3 champion.
Yeah, but it is Alexander Albon.
And technically, he didn't come last place.
Exactly. So, do you know what? It's a good weekend all round, okay, for Williams.
I mean, that's.
And I hope he had a lovely last time driving in Mexico. Also, I love that there's been this weird narrative over the weekend of like rumors that he might go to IndyCar and all that stuff, and he's like dismissing and being like, oh, there are only rumors. Like, who are making these rumors? What substance does any of this have?
Marcus Ericsson went to IndyCar, and I think he won a race maybe at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, but Marcus Ericsson was okay at least.
I also want to say
he was
though,
a decent driver.
The future of Williams, FP1, Nicholas Latifi was faster than Logan Sargent. So whoa, let's not get ahead of ourselves too much, okay?
Also, that was a big L on Williams. Just they needed to do one more lap for him to get an extra super license spot. What? How do you mess it up so much? Like, yes, I think he might
have had reliability issues, to be brutally honest, before you get to.
But still, just put it into pit limiter. Just do one slow lap around. Yes. You'll have yellow flags everywhere.
Just walk the track.
Absolutely, push it. But I think because I think Logan has to get fifth in the constructors for him to get the enough super license points to get that seat. But my worry is, imagine if he doesn't. I don't know what the standings are currently in F2 or whatever.
If that seriously does, I know exactly what you're going to say. If that seriously does happen and he misses out on a Formula 1 seat because he didn't do one more lap in a Williams, he probably doesn't deserve to be in Formula 1. Do you know what I mean? You can't
That's not his fault. That's Williams' fault. He doesn't control when he can drive the car. Box. Oh yeah, no, I'm just going to ignore you. I need one more lap on the tally.
Anyway, moving swiftly on. Aston Martin, a kind of a horrible weekend overall, but I mean, it's got to be said. He ran a brilliant Red Bull helmet, which I can't believe he was actually allowed to run, but good to see kind of both teams allowing it. You know, obviously there's a lot of behind the scenes, like commercial things that make it pretty difficult for an Aston Martin driver to run a Red Bull logo, but yeah, love that little tribute, but unfortunately it wasn't quite Aston Martin's weekend, but we did see a pretty good battle between Vettel and Zhou, though. That was kind of good, so yeah, at least there was some kind of a highlight, and then Stroll actually bottling it against Gasly.
Yeah, definitely. Vettel.
Stroll didn't bottle it against Gasly. Gasly bottled it against Stroll.
No, Gasly bottled it against Ocon. Remember, it was Ocon. It wasn't Stroll.
Oh dear. Yeah, Aldous is becoming Ted Kravitz.
Yeah, Sebastian Vettel matched Schumacher's time, so it's good that those two are so close that they are set exactly at the same time in Q1. Not a lot between Stroll and Vettel, so I was happy with that. But yeah, in the race, Vettel managing to really work those softs. Obviously, he was on the start on the softs. Stroll was on the mediums. I didn't really understand why they pitted Stroll so early from the medium tyres. It was a bit of a confusing one, especially how Vettel managed to do 38 laps.
Mad.
Vettel did 38 laps on a brand new set of softs, and Stroll was pitted on lap 17, I'm looking.
Absolutely unbelievable. It was mad. But yeah, 14th and 15th. The car just clearly hasn't worked here in the high altitudes, but hopefully going to Brazil and then Abu Dhabi, maybe it can be back in the top 10 for both of them.
Yeah, I got to go to Vettel as well. I didn't realise until sort of fairly late on, because I was in Scotland, I wasn't able to just quickly see stuff on social.
Watching the highlights.
No, I watched it here live, so don't come at me here. I watched the sessions live.
We only have your word for it.
But no, I didn't realise. Obviously, originally it was obviously for the founder of the Red Bull Racing team. So I actually thought that was quite cool. So I'm assuming, obviously, if he was just, at first I thought it was just going to be old heritage helmets, as his last sort of hurrah. But I actually thought it was a real nice touching momentum. But yeah, I got to go to Vettel on this one just because I don't know. Obviously, we're all applauding him doing 38 laps on the softs. Don't know if his pace was good or not. He did the stint. That's all we know.
Just for the vibes.
Just for the vibes, absolutely. Yeah. What's actually saying that? I'll ask you real quick before we wrap up. What is, because obviously in Abu Dhabi would be his last F1 race. If he was to redo here a classic helmet, what one would you want him to do for this last special? Imagine he can do any helmet. Aston Martin are screwed. He's the helmet is given to him on the grid and be like, I'm wearing this, you can't do anything about it, screw your sponsorships, I'm out. What helmet would you want him to wear?
I'd probably say throw it back even before the Red Bull, the first karting helmet he had even before the Red Bull association, throw it all the way back for your last race in F1, something like that.
The one that sticks out for me most
wear Lance Stroll's helmet.
Yeah, wear Lance Stroll's helmet. There was that space one that you had for the guy who jumped from the edge of the atmosphere. And I think there was also one from a very Texan style helmet that I think I remember as well, which was really cool. But he's had so many over the years that it's honestly sad that they brought in those rules because his helmet design was incredible.
Yeah, I think I can't remember which one it was. I think there was one where he did it might have been a gold one. It might have been chrome, I think, as well. It might have been chrome for Singapore potentially, but it's where I think it might have been chrome Singapore where it's just all reflective, basically to sort of go out. And I think if he had a really reflective gold one to remind people, no, I am a championship winner. Like, I'm going to go out with my crown and this is how I'm going to go. So I think something like that would be quite cool.
Just one with his face. That's what I want. I want the face helmet on the outside.
No, because Daniel Ricciardo did that. We all saw what happened with him. So
yeah, but he didn't just have his face as the whole helmet though, didn't he? He had a face on the top. So he needs his face as the whole helmet.
No, I think anything like that, those helmets are cursed. Don't do that, Seb. Don't do that. We don't need a P18 masterclass for your final race. And actually, Matt, there is one team left. It's called Haas. We're not wrapping it up just yet. I think it's going to go to Mick Schumacher. Did not see them at all, to be brutally honest. I think Mick finished, he finished ahead of K-Mag, and I think that's the only thing I know about them, to be brutally honest.
Yeah, Mick, he did get out qualified by Magnussen. Magnussen got into Q2, but Mick much better in the races. Honestly, Mick, this second half of the season has been the better driver for me at Haas, and I would be, in all fairness, surprised if he doesn't get that seat and it's not done on politics. So yeah, Mick Schumacher for me will be that driver.
Yeah, I've got to agree. Politics, Matt?
No. No, I've got to agree. Mick did just drive the better race. So yeah, Magnussen well in qualifying, but I don't know what happened with Magnussen. As you said, we didn't really see much of it during the broadcast. Don't know if he kind of got swallowed up in the first lap or whatever it was, but Mick was far ahead. And I think he's obviously Gunnar Steiner's come out saying it was still 50-50 about where his future is with Mick Schumacher being with the team, and ultimately
that's not good odds.
Yeah, and also like having, I think he also had a spin. I think it was an FP1. Obviously, if it's FP2, you can blame it on the tires, but I think it was an FP1. He had to have a bit of a spin, but at least it wasn't a proper
track
accident.
Limits in Q1 as well, which wasn't a good look.
Yeah, he properly he cut the corner, didn't he? On turn 2, I think it was, like fully just went over the curb. But at least it's not going into the wall, which is pretty much the main thing he needs to kind of not focus on, which is good. So yeah, for this one I got to go Schumacher,
which is very good for their sponsors, their new sponsors. Magnussen didn't do any of that, so come on, think about it, Steiner.
Once again, silver linings, ladies and gentlemen. But there you go. That wraps up the F1 Talking Points episode on the Mexican Grand Prix. Not exactly a classic, it must be said. But still plenty of talking points. If you did enjoy this one, then don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on whatever audio platform you are listening to. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye. Bye.